I'm going to pour into you and I'm going to love on you. But you better freaking get your butt up and get back out in the world. God has created us to be us, not a shadow of anybody else. And you can't be the best in the world at being somebody else. You can't. But you can be the best in the world at being you. I just wanted to be normal. I just wanted to fit in. My parents were like, stop freaking fitting in, Ben. You're going to stick out, so why don't you take the attention that's being given to you and why don't you use it for good? When you feel crappy, when you feel like the world's against you, it's hard to shine. Are you actually showing up like you've always wanted to show up to be a dad?
All right, welcome to the Rad Dad Podcast. This is episode 24. I have Ben Kjar on the podcast. Ben and I have known each other for over a decade. That we've kind of lost connection. We wrestled together years and years ago, but I've always followed Ben's journey and his story. So super happy to have you on, Ben. I start every episode off with the same question, and that is, talk to me about your upbringing and a few highlights from your childhood.
Yeah, for sure, man. So my upbringing, I was really blessed. A lot of people are have their trials and tribulations in life. Mine were not my family. My family was the opposite of that. They were my joy, man. They were my support. They were my they had my back. So I had parents, and I have parents that are absolutely fantastic humans. And I tell you what, that's what made it a world of difference. I mean, my dad would sit there in wrestling tournaments and point his finger in my chest and say, this is you. You're the champion. You're the one on top of the podium. And he would point at the podium when everyone was getting their awards and say, you're going to be up there. You're going to be up there. And that was pivotal for me because when I was born with something called Cruzon syndrome, which is a craniofacial anomaly. So at a young age, doctors would tell me that I couldn't do contact sports for sure because I'd have tons of reconstructive facial surgeries. And Cruzon syndrome affects the way that you look and affects the way that your mid part of your face grows. And so the surgeries would be pretty extensive. But when your doctors tell you can't do those type of sports, but you have the reassurance from your father and your mom that you're going to freaking blaze your own path and you're going to live your own life, then that was like a massive confidence boost, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in my upbringing, those were pivotal points that I'll never forget because I always knew that they wanted me to live. Now, question that I see nowadays: do parents coddle or cuddle? You talk about being a dad, right? Coddle or cuddle? Well, my parents weren't coddlers. They were people, and there's a full difference between those, right? Like for an example, what do you think when I say that? What's coddling and cuddling? What do you think the difference of those are?
To me, I'd say coddling is like kind of hovering over them and protecting them, and cuddling is comfort after something has happened.
Yeah, I think you're right on, man. I coddling just like I don't like sitting down and if something happens, you wrap your kid in a bubble wrap and you're like, don't do anything else. Don't go
Yeah,
outside.
yeah,
Anything that could risk your, health or anything like that. Wrap you in a mattress and bubble wrap and stuff like that. Where that's coddling. Cuddling is like, I'm gonna pour into you and I'm gonna love on you, but you better freaking get your butt up and get back out in the world. I mean, there's a massive difference there, right? Um, where you react to life trials by certain things like that. My parents were cuddlers. They loved big. But I tell you what, there was no, like, I mean, I've won 7 kids. There's no favoritism. It was like, hey, you're just as blessed as everyone else. Get up and get your butt going, baby. And my parents would tell me, hey, you were born a little bit different, right? I speak about this all the time on stage. In a lot of, I talk about the difference, and then because you're different, how do you make a difference? Instead of wishing you're not different, why freaking make a difference, right? And so that was kind of the definition of my childhood. How I would accept me being me, and how I would accept um, how life would be at that point. And my parents and my brothers and sisters and my cousins and my friends were a massive pivotal part of that.
Um, why did your dad choose wrestling? Was it something that the family did, or was it like, this is the hardest sport and that's how you're going to learn, and let's run with that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. You and I are bonded together because of the sport of wrestling, and everyone that I know in the sport of wrestling has become almost like a family, right? It's easy. It's such a sport that's so tenacious and so hard and so difficult that you immediately gain respect for someone, right? You see someone with cauliflower ear, you heard they wrestled, you're like, I got you.
Yeah.
You know, you
Yeah.
kind of like the pact of like military brothers, right?
Hmm.
For my dad, it wasn't necessarily wrestling was the god sport. It was, I'm going to involve you, Ben. Me speaking for myself, because my other brothers and sisters did different things too, but they decided at a young age, you parents out there, listen to this. Take this in to your heart, to your soul. Put this into your mind. Your kids need confidence. And if you're a football player, it may not be in football. So stop living with freaking ego and trying to live through your kid, right? And I'm learning that right now. My kids may not even wrestle, and so that's totally fine. Could I help them immensely in the sport of wrestling? Yeah, I can. I know a ton of moves. I spent the majority of my life even traveling the world doing wrestling. But guess what? It may not be their calling. But everybody understands mentality. So pour into your kid with mentality and love. So my parents just wanted, why did they choose wrestling? Well, it wasn't really, that's just what they chose. We chose clogging, singing, we chose theater, we chose family band, we chose soccer, indoor soccer, baseball, basketball, we chose football. My parents chose everything, and I would decide what I found confidence in. Too many times as parents, we try to like live. This is only what you. No, listen. Your kid's gonna do what they love doing, and you got to allow them to figure that out. Well, look at me. I'm 5'3", not too tall. I'm not. It's gonna be a super rare situation. I'm not Muggsy Bogues, right? Who was only 5'3" player in the entire NBA, and it was super rare. Football. I love football. Played for 5 years. Great sport. Soccer, absolutely love it. Baseball. It just so happened I was tired in life and having other people control me, suffocate me, tell me what I could and couldn't do, that wrestling was a good fit. Now, why? Because I can control what I do. The politics, for the most part, I think politics play a part in every sport, but for the most part, it's mano a mano. It's man to man, woman to woman. It's one person versus one person. You don't hide behind a mask. You don't hide behind your pads, whatever that is, right?
Yep.
So at the end of the day, it's like, listen, it's me and you. And if I choose in my life to listen to the coaches when they say do 20 push-ups, then just plan on being the minimum. Plan on being average if I plan on doing 20 push-ups. You want to be different? You want to stick out? Do more than 20 freaking push-ups. So to answer your question, they didn't choose. That was one of the options. I was directed to wrestling, and that's what I chose. When I went into high school, I decided to quit or stop doing every other sport, and I just stopped. I'm just like, listen, I'm going to focus on wrestling, and that is it. And I believe more now than ever that at some point you need to do that. For me, I think it's high school. I think before that, it's fantastic. There's a lot of fantastic team sports that I'm going to put my kids in if that's what they want to do. But wrestling was a pivotal part for me. Now, let me kind of say what I just said, kind of tongue in cheek, though.
Yeah, go for it.
I was talking to my brothers, so since me and my brothers and my dad have went to the NCAA championships every March. So this was like our 24th year, minus COVID. Nothing went on in COVID, so it's like 23 years technically. But so we go out there, and my brother lives up in Washington, just a couple years older than me, and we're talking about kids. And he's a cycle ahead of me, meaning he has older kids than me. So I poured into him and said, "Hey, Luke, um, your kids are now, pretty late into elementary. My kids are 4, 4, and 3, and we just started wrestling. And what and they wanted to go, right? So I facilitated that. But some days, and we do a pretty dang good job of keeping it fun. I mean, it's like controlled babysitting with some technique and
Yeah.
basically tumbling games, right? But at the end of the day, his advice to me was this when I posed this question. I said, what do you do when they don't want to go? What do you do when it just doesn't seem fun? And my brother said this, and this was interesting to think about. He's like, Ben, tell you what, you've lived a life of almost 40 years now. My brother's a couple years older, 42. He said, do you feel like you've learned a lot in that time? I said, yeah. You feel like you got some wisdom from those things? Yeah, I think so. He's like, do you feel like that wisdom has more knowledge and time and seasoning than your 4-year-old has? I'm like, yeah, you're probably right. He said, well, then you probably know better than your kid what's good for them, don't you think? I said, yeah. What you're getting at is your kids are going to not want to do hard stuff. Don't let them be that kid. Don't let them be the snowflake. Snowflake, if you don't know what that is, it's just a terminology used that's nice and beautiful, and it's so graceful when it falls to the ground or hard surface, but once it hits something hard, it just melts. Right?
Yep.
So at the end of the day, he was pointing to me saying, Ben, our kids get to go through hard things. But when they commit to something, let them commit. And then keep them accountable to that commitment. And not that next year, if they just absolutely hate sport, whether it's ballet, wrestling, clogging, or singing, I wouldn't say force them into it because then they'll hate it. But I would say start what you finish. And if you committed to wrestling, if you committed to football, if you committed to dance class for a season, why don't you show up and shine? And I believe as parents, as dads, as moms, as our calling is to strive to teach these kids those types of timeless principles and values that I feel like are being lost.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like something I've observed is it's also a commitment on the parents' part, because you see these parents and their kid wants to quit, and the parent, has a full-time job and religious activities and all different stuff going on. So they're like, you know what, quit. I don't have to take you to practice. So there's definitely a commitment on the parents' part as well. But teaching your kids to do hard things is so special, and it can ripple throughout the rest of their lives. I'm saying that from example because that's what I learned. That's exactly what I learned wrestling. And I can see the lessons learned from wrestling just ripple in bigger decisions that I've made later on in my life. So I love that example that you shared. Now, I want to get your thoughts on a lesson that your parents have taught you in your upbringing concerning loving who you are and how you will share that lesson with your kids.
So when I was in elementary, that's a solid question, by the way. Isn't that the billion-dollar question, right? Mm, when I was in elementary, and it wasn't just in elementary, it went through college. And there's still battles, right? Because the battles, it really comes down to comparison.
Yeah.
If you're not comparing yourself to other people, then who you're comparing yourself with, like yourself, right? And so it really just comes down to it's comparison. Well, if you're not enough for what? For who? Like who you're like? What does that mean? What's the definition? So we all do that, and the two biggest humankind, is fear of failure and fear of not being enough for something or somebody, right? Some type of comparison or measurement. Well, in elementary, I started to understand you start to realize, what you look like, what shape you are, whether you're overweight, you're too tall, you're too short, you're the wrong skin color, you have an accent. Well, for me, it just happened to be my face. That was the difference, which is the first thing you see, right? And I'll never forget, like it was one of my buddies growing up. He had a scar on his leg. He may have been burned or something. I don't even know. I never asked him, but I do know that I was so jealous. He was such a good basketball player, and we're on the same junior jazz team. And I was so jealous that one time I looked over in basketball, and his shorts kind of hiked up a little bit higher above his knee, and I saw a scar. I'd never seen it before, and I remember after that noticing how he would keep pulling his shorts down, and then he would wear pants a lot. And I was so jealous that he could hide that. I was so jealous that he could put behind a curtain or behind pants per se, right? The difference. And so when people saw it, it was like normal, like no issues. He wasn't treated any differently. But for me, it wasn't that case. So in elementary, I started noticing that, and I started comparing myself and wishing that I was Bobby, Johnny, Billy, version 2.0. Now, people understand that now more than ever just because we have electronics and they go off of versions or series. Hey, get the latest 9.1 or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
So 2.0, people understand that. Now you're like a second version. Or it means that you're just a shadow of somebody. But you're just that because God has created us to be us, not a shadow of anybody else. And you can't be the best in the world at being somebody else. You can't. But you can be the best in the world at being you. And that's pretty much, a sure fit. But I remember walking down the halls and just thinking, if I just looked like them, man, I'd have that girlfriend. Oh my gosh, I could be a little bit taller. I could play that. But mostly it was like, man, life would be different. I'd be accepted. And I would have different friends. Life would be easier. It wouldn't always be a guessing game. And so there were times in my life that I had and experiences that I had where I'd be coming home and my parents would then need to basically stand me in front of the mirror. And, and then we would go over our I am statements. Now, I am statements are pretty dang powerful because I believe that the space behind the I am statement is literally what we define in our lives. So, for example, if you look in front of the mirror and you say, I am fat, ugly, annoying, insufficient, I'm just not enough, you're probably going to be pretty dang right if you keep convincing yourself of that. Whereas, if you say something different after that, I'm powerful, I'm strong, I'm attractive, I'm I'm a beast, and you start this like obsessive um, conversion of what you believe you are and what you know you are, then you actually start to believe it. And when you start to believe it, the limitations that you give yourself or put on yourself are just like pretty soft. And so at a young age, I learned that my I am statements would make a difference. And then I also learned that putting in the work would highly and heavily support that. Well, what do I mean by that? I mean that you can say that you're the biggest beast and you're the biggest bodybuilder in the mirror, but if you never freaking go to the gym and do the work, it's just talk. All talk, no walk, baby. So you might as well walk the walk too. So I would go in front of the mirror, say certain things, then I would go to practice and whatever that sport was. And if I did more in that sport and that practice, I became more confident. And it just so happened that I did that enough times and I did that long enough, more than other people, then it happened. Because I was able to, like for example, in the sport of wrestling, I was able to get on the weight scale before the tournament and know that no matter what, everybody in that room had not worked harder than me. Period. And there's a confidence behind that. When you're late in the third period, for those of you guys don't know, wrestling is 3 periods. When you're late in the third period and every little bit of your body from ankle to heel to shoulder to elbow to fingertips to ears to head is tired, because wrestling is the most tenacious sport, and you're like, how am I going to do this? You just get to remember, I've worked harder than this guy, and I deserve it. So those were the differences in me owning who I was, understanding that I was not just enough, but more than enough. Understanding that I just didn't want to be normal, even though the majority of my life I just wanted to be normal. I just wanted to fit in. My parents were like, stop freaking fitting in, Ben. You're going to stick out, so why don't you take the attention that's being given to you and why don't you use it for good? And they just like brought that feeling of like acceptance to me and owning it that allowed me to be me and allowed me to own who I am, flex who I am, and live who I am. And I can be the best me, man. I can rule the world in my life. But me trying to be Johnny, Billy, and Tommy 2.0, good luck, man. You're going to fail every time.
So this starting this podcast has kind of started me on the journey of just exploring like what self-love is and what it means. I feel like I've always gone throughout my life, like when I think about it in my head, I'm like, I like who I am. But the next step is to love who I am, right? Is there a moment in your life that you flip that switch of hearing that you love Ben to feeling that you love Ben?
Dude, Jace, that's deep, dude. That's really good. That's a journey, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
It's a journey to be able to do that. So Here's what I believe in life, and it happens today. How many kids you got, Jace?
One and one in about 3 weeks.
Oh
Yeah.
man! Oh, congrats, man.
Thank
That's
you.
cool. What I realize is this: there is moments in life that define who we are, and I personally feel that we define our legacy. We define what we stand for. We lay our who we are out there by deciding and reacting to the next moment after our darkest of times. So you asked the question, how do you become a person that you can basically look up to and fall in love with? How do you become your own biggest hero?
Yeah.
Can I define it as that?
Yeah.
To me, we all love the Rocky movies. We all love the movies of Braveheart. We're in the moment of despair and defeat. They rise up in the moment of darkness and just like complete impossible. They rise up to win or go against the enemy or the foe. How do you become your own biggest hero? Well, you just do that. You just be a victor when everybody else wants you to be a victim. You just shine when everybody else feel like you've been put under a bushel. When you've been shoved in the closet in the darkness. And that's the hardest thing to do, because when you feel crappy, when you feel like the world's against you, it's hard to shine. I'll give you an example. Now, probably the majority of your listeners have never heard my story of gaining kids. And I say gaining kids because my path wasn't the normal path. I mean, you're planning to have a child in the next 3 weeks. Well, how do you know you're going to have a child? Your wife's pregnant.
Yep.
Ultrasounds, you do these things. Well, for us, that wasn't a gift that we were given. We tried for 10 years to have kids, hundreds of appointments, 4 IVF cycles, 2 miscarriages, a little boy and a girl, 2 failed adoptions, a little boy and a little girl, tons of money in, hundreds of thousands of dollars invested, no luck. And there was a moment after the last mom that took our money, took about $35,000 of ours, and in the 6th month, and this is right after the first birth mom of our adoption, she took our last payment of about, $45,000, and she emailed us after the last payment, remind you. She said, "Oh, I'm not going to place the baby." And that's fine. We signed up for that risk. But it's interesting how you do that after the last payment. So we go into the next adoption. Because I believe, and this goes to what I'm trying to talk about, I believe in new beginnings, not dead ends. And if you're a dead end believer, there's some scary reality to that. And there's people that are ending their life left and right. I had a friend not too long ago do that because he felt like it was just a dead end. There's no new beginning after this. I have nothing left. I'm at the end of my rope. Well, those thoughts go through your mind, of course. Well, how do you come together and react? Well, there was a time where my wife and I had come out of a place that we feel like is very sacred, and we had come together, and it didn't give me peace that I normally found, and I was more angry actually. And we went to God because we had just found out that our second birth mom, after taking $35,000 of ours, she'd stopped showing up to birth, basically doctor appointments. We found out that she had placed the same baby with two other families.
Wow.
She was triple dipping financially. And so we started researching on social media, and she didn't even look like she was pregnant. She probably had a miscarriage. Didn't tell any of us, and was just trying to fund her next years of living.
Wow.
So we find this all out accidentally through research, through dissecting, through people who are like finding this stuff out. And I was angry. Like I was angry with God. I'm like, what the freak is going on? Like, what's happening here?
Yeah.
And then believing in that moment, that night, I was so pissed, feeling like it was a dead end. And then deciding, you know what, are we going to do a new beginning? Well, we just our misery and crap, and we decided to do a new beginning. I'm like, you know what? Are we going to be victims, or are we going to stand up being victims? The next day, we get a call. The next day, mind you, this was the night before when we were crying our eyes out and saying, why me, victim, victim, victim. Dead end, dead end, dead end. We got a call saying, hey, there was just a boy that was just born last night. We heard you guys wanted to adopt. You guys want a boy. In the moment of our misery, in the moment of our depths of despair, in the moment of the hatred and why me and God, what are you doing? He was giving us the biggest gift. So the question is, how do we rebound in those moments?
Yeah.
You react like a hero. You react like a victor. And then you get out of those moments and you realize, oh my gosh, that's what heroes do. I was a hero. In the moment where I felt like I was being gutted on the table, like William Wallace, do I react? Do I say, no, I actually take back everything I said that I felt like was true, and you're right? Or do you yell freedom? No, I live my truth. That night, man, we hit victim mentality. We hit dead end. And then we reacted and we rebounded like a hero. Now, the story goes on to where when we go to pick up my baby boy, we end up um, going, and here's a dude. I got to tell this story because here's the thing: you ask your question. How do you come from love or like to love? You do the hard freaking things, and you don't know if it's going to pay off. And the hero's journey is not beautiful,
Right.
but it's incredibly fulfilling, and it is incredibly admirable. And there are incredible, and it's a beautiful journey. But in the moment, the makeup isn't always on, and it's not always gorgeous. And I felt that, man. But when I go to pick up my boy, I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, I have no preparation. I have no 3-week preparation. I had 15 hours before I jumped on the plane, and now I'm a dad. And you wonder if you're doing the right thing. So, in the journey to be the hero, your listeners right now, you guys out there listening to this, you're going through something. You don't have Cruzon syndrome. You probably have kids, and you're probably able to get pregnant, right? Unlike me. I have many blessings. These have been my trials I'm talking about. I'm extremely vulnerable with them because I learned that that's the way to be. And I learned that's the way to show up for you guys, to show my vulnerability. But when I learned that, it changed my life. I used to feel that when I was vulnerable, I was not bulletproof. I now am bulletproof because I'm vulnerable. There's a book called Good to Great. It talks about level 5 leadership. Level 5 leaders. The most incredible leaders in the world are vulnerable. Why? Because you can connect with those individuals. Not to go off tangent, coming back. I came back to a place where I was very vulnerable. But in this vulnerability, you don't know if what you're doing is the hero's journey. You don't know if what you're doing is just freaking idiotic, if you should be doing these things, or if it's something that God wants you to do. But as you're in those journeys, as you take the step forward, like Indiana Jones is coming out with a new movie, right? Reminds me of the time where he's going over to pick up the goblet. And do you remember the moment where he's going to pick it up, but there happens just to be a massive like canyon right
Yep.
in front of him?
Yep.
And he knows he needs to step forward. And the moment he knows it's a step of faith is when he steps and all of a sudden, boom, the platform appears. And then there's solid ground. And then he does it again. Solid ground, does it again. Solid ground. And I didn't even think about this, but when he goes in there, was the goblet that was the chosen goblet, was it the most beautiful one with the best of jewels? It wasn't. And that's how life is. The most incredible individuals are usually not the ones like Warren Buffett, an old dude who has like McDonald's every morning, and I think he's still driving his Toyota. He still lives in the same house in Omaha, Nebraska, but yet he's a multi billionaire. These are the type of people that shine. So I go to the Midwest, I adopt this baby boy, and I don't know if it's the right journey. And I'm wondering, Ben, are you making a mistake or are you being the hero? Are you actually showing up like you've always wanted to show up to be a dad? Guys, I promise you, in these moments where you're unsure about if you're doing the right things, you'll find out and God will direct you. So we had just lost, we had a miscarriage that was a girl, a miscarriage that was a boy, but then the two adoptions after that would have been girls. And so we had a ton of girl names. We had like $1,000 worth of pink clothes at home, you know?
Yeah.
And so this is what happened. There was a massive impact on my life. The adoption director and the attorney said this: "Hey, congratulations, you got a baby boy. Tomorrow morning you sign documents and you need to put the name of the boy on those documents. See you tomorrow." So we went back to our hotel. My wife and I are like, we don't have any freaking girl names. Like, or boy names. All we have is girl names. We were thinking about girl names. And so we come up with 3 boy names that we thought were really cool, impactful. We go to bed. I woke up in the middle of the night. I'll never forget waking up in the middle of the night and the name Liam comes to me. Liam, Liam, Liam. It wasn't one of the 3 names. God had placed that name in my mind and my heart. Next day I get up. We go to the hospital. I told my wife what happened. I'm like, she's like, "Ben, you were rolling around for 3 hours. What happened?" I told her. She's like, "That means something." So we show up, go and we meet with the adoption mom and the attorney. It was our turn to come in, and the adoption mom said, "I hope you don't mind, but the attorney had me sign a name for the baby. You guys can change it. It was just, formalities." But I'm like, "What name did you choose?" She's like, "Well, I looked up definitions, and I chose a name that meant protective warrior. I know this is your oldest boy. I know this is your only child. If you choose to have more kids, I want him to be the protective warrior." And I'm like, "That's powerful. What
Yeah.
name means protective warrior?" And she said, "The name is Liam."
Wow.
And it was powerful because when God comes, man, he comes powerful. Right after that, we get up after sharing a bunch of emotions. And then we walked down the hallway. The adoption director was on her phone, hung up the phone, and she said, "Hey, Ben and Nicole, I know you guys lost a boy and a girl in miscarriage." Nicole, my wife, she's like, "You're a twin, right?" She's like, "Yeah." She's like, "How would you like to raise twins?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" She said, "I just got off the phone," and she's wiping her tears. She's like, "I just got off the phone with a lady who lives 20 minutes away. The kids would be 5 days apart. It's a little baby girl." And so our journey started out with a lot of dead ends. I fully believe that we define who we are in our legacy and how we rebound and how we have our new beginnings. And I also believe that as we show up like that, we become our own admirer. And we look in the mirror like, oh my gosh, you are one bad dude. This is happening, this is happening, this is happening, this is happening. You go bam, 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 bam. And you are just one bad mofo, baby. And you just continue to show up. And you continue to shine. And you continue to freaking rise. And that's what makes you a hero. That's what makes you proud of yourself. Because you do things that makes you proud. But here's the thing, and this is the dangerous thing. We go out in the world as parents, and we feel like we just need to pour into our kids. Yes, you pour into your kids, but how do you pour into your kids? Ed Milet. I don't know if your listeners have heard of him, but he's a powerful person. He speaks. I listened to him speak live in Florida a few months back, and he stood on stage and he said this. All you parents out there, raise your hand. A bunch of hands go in the air. Have you heard of the other form of child abuse? And they're like, what? He's like, I'm not talking about the child abuse that you may think of sexual, or you're beating a kid, or physical, or even emotional. But it's the form of child abuse that is one of the worst kinds. And the crowd goes silent. And he said, the child abuse I referred to is the child abuse of you as parents because you stop dreaming. And your kids have no freaking clue how to dream because their parents don't dream. The parents don't live their goals. Parents don't live life. The parents aren't their own freaking hero. The parents don't show up for themselves. You get married, you let yourself go physically, you just let yourself go mentally, you try to live financially as much as you can, spiritually as much as you can, and you pour as much time. You say, I don't have time for the gym, I don't have time for my morning routines, I don't have time for scripture, I don't have time for church, I don't have time for prayer, because I need to pour into my kids. That is freaking pouring into your kids. You put on the air on your mask, on your mask on your face in the airplane when it's going down before you do it to the passenger next to you. You get to show up and survive and inhale and breathe before you can pour into anybody else. And so the parent that I want to be is the parent that lives a dream. And it's not about necessarily achieving the dream, right? It's not necessarily always just focusing on the medal at the top of the podium or on the podium, but it's about the journey. Because your kids probably aren't going to achieve the dream all the time. I asked my kid, what do you want to be? Professional basketball player. Now, good thing he's adopted because I'm 5'3", right?
Yeah.
So he's hopefully going to be taller than that. But it's a fraction of a chance that he'll be that. But you know what he will understand? He'll understand the journey. if his parents show him the journey. So I think that's a pivotal point.
Love it. So your message of being a victor or victim, have you ever considered that there's maybe a middle ground between those two?
You mean you're talking about the journey of becoming that? Is that what you're talking about?
No, I'm maybe talking about a stage that people just get stuck in where they're not necessarily a victim, but they're not trying to be a victor either. They're just existing and surviving.
Sure, yeah, those are the guys. I'll give you an answer direct right now. It's pretty easy for me. The difference is when their coach tells them to do 20 push-ups, they're just doing 20 push-ups.
Okay. Yeah.
That's it. They're living life. They're doing nothing different. They're not getting in uncomfortable situations, or they are to the level that they are. So let's rate people from 1 to 10. Let's say 10 is the biggest victor in the world. 1 is the biggest victim in the world. Well, if you're at a level 7 and you're stuck at a level 7, it's because you're doing things that level 7 people do. That's period. And great. Let's just put it in education. If you're a C or you're a B or you're an A, great student, you're doing things that those people do. Period. Now, it doesn't mean that if you're a level or grade B student, you can't be a level A. It just may not come as natural to you. So what do? You hire a tutor. Well, in life, those tutors are called coaches. They're called mentors. They're called friends. They're called family. Some of you guys just don't have friends or family that are those type of tutors. Some of you guys in college didn't have the family that would qualify as your math tutor. And so you don't have them help you with math. It's very simple. In life, some of your family members or people you hang out with aren't your mentors. So don't have them be those type of people. Or surround yourself with upgraded people. And so people who are stuck, change it up.
Awesome.
Change and do something different. I call it my man down. I had a friend come with me, good buddy of mine. His name's Mark. He went and came to a bunch of my investments. I do real estate investing. And he came to a property of mine that's a 7-figure rehab. Not the cost of the house, not the cost of the land, just the rehab is over $1 million. And he asked me, and this is a big player. I mean, this guy builds like the basketball courts for a ton of the NBA teams. We were in his truck and he had like a championship Golden State Warriors ring
Wow.
that was given by the operations director. I mean, this guy is connected, right? But he said, Ben, do you have you lose sleep over this? I'm like, lose sleep over what? He's like, these type of investments. I said all the time. All the time, baby. I need a man freaking diaper. Give me an example. I may sound like I'm a little under the weather. My eyes may be a little puffy. 2 nights ago, I stayed up till 4 a.m. Did I want to? Heck no. I'm a type of person that needs 7, minimum 8 hours of sleep because I'm a high energy type of dude. Otherwise, I crash. I got sick from it. But I had a presentation that I needed to dial in for people that were showing up, and I needed to perform. Do I want to do that stuff? Heck no. Did it affect me a couple days later? Yeah, dude. I had to, cancel some appointments today and just take a nap because of it. But here's the deal. Do you live in an area of comfortability? I'll tell you right now, there's a whole nother levels that I can go to. Why am I not there? Because I'm too comfortable in where I'm living right now. I'm too comfortable. It feels too good that I don't want to put in the work to do the rest. So, for example, yeah, I may feel like I'm doing 22 push-ups when my coach tells me to do 20. Well, I'm not doing 30. I'm not doing 35. And that annualized over a year from my competitor who's doing 10 more than me, a day, man, that adds up to be thousands of push-ups more than me. And that's when the paths start doing this. So yeah, if you're stuck, change it up. Get a mentor. Find someone who is a cycle ahead of you. I told you the example of my brother about being a parent.
Yep.
Hey, you're a cycle ahead of me. What can I learn from this? And then be a really good student and realize that everybody, no matter where they're at in life, even the homeless dude on the street, is better than us in some form or some area of life. So everybody gets to learn from another person. If we're humble enough and we're willing enough to do that.
Awesome. I love it. So, being somebody that's been so motivated your whole life, what changed in your motivation when you became a dad?
Oh, man. I'll tell you. My kids' reality of what life is probably 90% based around how I live my life. Let me define that and dissect that for you.
Yeah.
If I get up in the morning and exercise, and that's what they see as being life, do you think they'll expect to do that? If I say prayer before I have my meal, and it's a habit, is that what you need to do? Yeah. If I do A, B, or C, X, Y, or Z, do they feel like they need to do A, B, and C, X, Y, and Z? That's what they do. Or at least that's what they think is reality. You know what the cool thing is? Reality is what you call it. Reality is how you show up. If we literally teach our kids that you're supposed to go to bed as soon as the light goes, as soon as the sun sets and mom and dad go to bed, that's what they'll think. At some point, they'll start realizing that the world doesn't always act that way as well.
Yeah.
And that's the moment that you hope that you've ingrained in them, the victor mentality. So what changed for me as a parent? How I show up, my default standards is literally going to be what they expect life is about. And that is super cool. And it's
Yeah.
also super freaking scary.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's fun because I look and I remember the other day I dropped something, I was pissed off or whatever. I'm like, gosh dang it. And my kid looks up and said, gosh dang it. Right? And it's reality and they see that. And so my kids' life is going to be defined, shaped, and formed around how I live my life.
I think it's easier for a victor to raise another victor than it is for a victim to raise a victor, right? But also, I guess a victor could still raise a victim, because in the end we all have our agency. But I love that message you shared where they base 90%. You said 90% of their reality is what you do. They're watching you,
When
and
I just that up, just because it may be more or less, I'm just thinking like, hey, listen, my kids for the first 5 years are in our care probably over 90% of the time.
yeah,
But when they're in our care, they see what reality is.
right,
They see kids talk, they see how they walk, they see
yep,
how they speak, and that's just what happens. And so that's just that's just what goes on. But there's going to be people here. You asked initially a really good question. How were you raised? And the first thing I said were my parents were incredible. And so that was not my vice. That was not my trial. That was not my struggle. That's not the case for many people. So people
Right.
listening to this didn't have a rad dad, didn't have an awesome mom. And so you may be thinking, well, geez, Ben had it lucky. No, I had different struggles than you.
Right.
But I figured out a way to become a victor in those struggles and not a victim. And that's what you get to choose to do. You get to choose to not be or not do the things that your dad did. Your dad hit your kid, your dad hit you, don't hit your kid. And you even know better because my dad didn't hit me. And so you probably think, well, you don't understand. You're right, I don't understand. But you know what we do understand? Is this a dead end or a new beginning for you? Are you going to create a new beginning, a new chance, a new opportunity for you to be your hero? You want to love who you are? Be the person you've always dreamt about being. That's what it's about. That's what it's like. Be
Right.
the hero. Be the hero mom. Well, what the freak is that? I don't know. That's for you to decide. Is that so? For me, I break down my life in 6 different categories. I literally define it. I literally define it. As a matter of fact, check this out. My hair. You see this? This is my office. This is from last year. It was just closest thing to me. My other one's right there for this year. This can you see this? This
Yep.
says faith, family. It's kind of tough here now. I'm doing this. Where is this? Okay, there you go. Faith, family, fitness, finance, fun, and fulfillment. This is how I define my life in these categories. Faith, family, fitness, finance, fun, fulfillment. Oh, and here's my daily schedule. 7 to 8 workout and mentality. 8 to 9 family breakfast shower. 9 to 10:30 a.m. jam session. That's dissect my personal and business strategies. 10:30 to 11:30 business calls. Set up next day's schedule. 11:30 to 12:30 lunch and network. 12:35 business upkeep and project visits. Define your life in those categories, and you'll be your hero in whatever you're doing. And stop living regular. Stop living average. Because you want to be average, great. Jump in the freaking robot line of life. You'll never be remembered. You'll never echo in eternity. And your kids will find other people as heroes, and that's just it. Period. You won't be their hero. You'll be just you'll just be a regular Joe, and that's fine. You want to be a regular Joe, be a regular Joe. It's just not the way I believe that we're created. I believe we're created to be freaking amazing. God created us to be amazing. And, we have that potential, but it's potential. It's not given, it's earned.
Awesome. The main reason I started this podcast is because I wanted to become a better dad. It's my journey of becoming a rad dad through having guests on that I believe are rad dads. And I take the responsibility of fatherhood very seriously. And, just through this podcast episode and discussing with you, it gets me pumped, to be the victor in my life and have that ripple effect for generations, hopefully. So I really appreciate your message that you shared. I end the podcast with the same question every episode. And that question is, if there's one lesson you want to leave with your kids when you're no longer here, what is that lesson?
The lesson is this. Um, Man, there's so many lessons. The lesson is the power of perspective and and loving deep. I know that sounds general, but perspective and how you show up and arrive and love deep. Because when you can love yourself and be proud of you, that will leak over into every aspect of your life. It will leak over into your relationship with your spouse. It will leak over into how you treat your kids, because when you know you're more than enough, you'll you'll exude that. It's not even something. It's like an X factor. It's not even something you can even describe.
Mm-hmm.
You'll just and you'll treat other people that way, and you'll shine. You'll be magnetic, and you will attract similar beings. And when your kids can love and understand and do that for themselves, then they'll naturally do it for other people. And and it doesn't matter to me about money or finances. It's not important. That's very secondary. It's that, because there's a lot of billionaires and movie stars that are just miserable people because they
Yeah.
don't those things. So that's what I would want to teach my kids.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that. Thanks for being on this episode and sharing your thoughts, stories, and experiences. And it's much appreciated.
I appreciate you, brother. You're shining like a light, man. I appreciate you doing everything that you're doing. I'm really proud of you, man.
Cool. Thank you.